Welcome to episode number 6 of the Sizzle Basketball Podcast. Today I'm going to continue what I've been doing for the last few weeks, which is the two-team segment, where I talk about one team in the first half and one team in the second half. That'll be one team in the East, and then followed by one team in the Western Conference. So today, the two teams I'm going to talk about are the 76ers in the East, and then I'll follow that up with the Sacramento Kings in the West. So I'll start in the Eastern Conference with the Philadelphia 76ers. Currently, the 76ers are number one in the Eastern Conference. They're 39-20. Well, they're tied with Brooklyn for number one right now. They're 39-20. They beat Brooklyn about a week or two ago. And Embiid missed over a month, and they have still kept a very steady and solid record this year. Seth Curry's been out for a little while. I know he's coming back very, very soon. I think he's actually coming back this week. You've had other guys out for this team as well. Ben Simmons is out, right? So, it's been tough. There's no timetable on Ben Simmons' return. So we'll keep an eye on that because he's a really big factor to this team and how successful they're going to be. Not just now, but especially in the playoffs. And I'll get to that in a second. But with Philly, I want to start with just this season and how great it's been for this team. They have been consistent. Right, they win games consistently. They don't drop a lot of games. It seems like in the last couple of years, they always had a 3 or a 4 seed and dropped a lot of games that they should win. And that's not been the case. That hasn't been the case this year. And a lot of that obviously stems from Embiid having the best season of his career on both ends of the floor, shooting the three ball really well. Being able to get to that mid-range shot. We know his post fade is great, and Embiid has really just played really well this year, and I think you have to look at it and say Embiid is 1 or 2 for MVP right now. I think a lot of people would say 2 from what I'm seeing. But, and I put my MVP rankings out the other day, and I had him at 2, but he's making a strong case for 1, too, as we go further on in the season. So keep an eye out on that. There's definitely a good chance that Embiid could walk home with the MVP trophy. As I mentioned, he's been more efficient this year. He's been even better on the defensive end. He's a guy who should get All-NBA defensive team, first team, or at least second team. And obviously, we know he'll get All-NBA first team. But, yeah, what he's done with this team this year, he's put this team on his back. I think he's finally stepped up and been aggressive in the paint, which is something he might have been lacking, some people would say, the last couple of years. He's stepped up. He's been aggressive in the paint. He's taken over that leadership role for Philly, and that's part of the reason why Philly's in the driver's seat right now to grab the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And, Philly is one of the best home teams in the league this season. So, with that being said, it'll be really important for them to try to go out and get that number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference because it'll be very tough for teams to beat Philadelphia when they have to go to Philadelphia, that amount of times because Philly will hopefully be the 1 seed, right? Let me get into Ben Simmons really quick. I don't understand why so many people always comment negatively on Ben Simmons' game. Listen, Ben Simmons should win Defensive Player of the Year this year, in my opinion. Right, I know in an earlier podcast with you, I talked about the fact that Rudy Gobert could be winning that award and how Rudy Gobert was number 1 on the MVP or Defensive Player of the Year ladder. But in my opinion, when I look at it, I think Ben Simmons should win Defensive Player of the Year. I think he can guard 4 positions, even 5 arguably, and he does that almost every night. He guards the team's best player every night, and then he switches to the team's second best player on a lot of occasions. He's great at switch defense. He's great in the post defensively. He's great on the perimeter defensively. He's physical, right? He's strong. He's quick. He's got all the tools that a great defensive player has, and in my opinion, he's the best defensive player in basketball. And then you add on his surreal playmaking and his ability to find other guys without turning it over a lot. You add that on to his very fast first step and his ability to get to the rim at will, right? And that makes Ben Simmons a really tough player to gauge for. And yeah, a lot of people would say, in the playoffs, he's not going to really put out a great effect because he can't shoot the ball. Well, let me also tell you this. He's also going to lock up the opposing team's number 1 option. And he's also going to make better than anyone, arguably, on both teams, right? Unless they play the Lakers with LeBron or Phoenix with Chris Paul, right? He's pretty much going to be the best playmaker on the floor. So with that being said, he gives you so many other things that might not include shooting, but he gives you so many other things at such a high level that even with him not being able to shoot, he's still such a valuable player, and this team needs him, right? This team needs him. And you've seen over the last, couple games with Philadelphia, since he's been out, how, it has affected them. the loss to Phoenix. And the loss a couple of nights ago to Golden State. So you can tell it definitely affects Philly in the way they play, right? Especially on the defensive end and especially with the playmaking. So, and he's a great rebounder too. So this is a guy that Philly needs to come back. He's definitely going to come back before the playoffs. We know that. We just don't know exactly what week, what day, right? But we definitely know he'll come back before the playoffs, which is great news for Philly. I know they're really looking forward to getting him back and suited up because he really helps that team out a lot. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye out on that when Ben Simmons comes back. And when he comes back, it will be big news for Philadelphia. The next player I want to talk about is Tobias Harris. I think this is Tobias Harris's best year as well in his career, as well as Embiid and as well as Simmons. Tobias Harris, this is the best year of his career in my opinion. He has taken steps forward, not only as a defensive player, but he's become more efficient, and he's become one of those scorers who doesn't have a lot of nights where he can't put the ball in the basket. Because really, when you look at Tobias Harris, he's just a scorer, right? And a lot of nights you would look at Tobias Harris and say, okay, tonight he shot 6 of 22. And, 2 nights ago he shot 10 of 25, right? You don't see those nights a lot anymore with Tobias Harris. He's been very efficient this season, and he's done it consistently. Every night he's been very efficient, and he's taken a step forward on the defensive end, which is a big thing with this Philadelphia team. Ben Simmons came out and said the other day, I should be Defensive Player of the Year. And if I'm not Defensive Player of the Year, it should be Embiid. And if he's not, it should be Tybalt. So this is a team that really has a lot of confidence in themselves on both ends of the floor, but especially on the defensive end of the floor, and they should. Because in my opinion, this is the most talented team on the defensive end of the floor. And as you can tell, as the seasons progress, they're starting to put things together more and more on the defensive end, and they're starting to look like they're scary on the defensive end. Because you have a team where when they roll out their starting five with Ben Simmons, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, and Joel Embiid. That's the scariest starting five, in my opinion, defensively based on talent in the league. And then you have a great head coach in Doc Rivers, who's always had great defensive teams. So that only helps the cause even more. So no, I mean, as I mentioned what Ben Simmons said, he's kind of right about it, because you think about it, those three guys should honestly, all of them should make, defensive teams in my opinion. Tybalt probably second team. Simmons should make first, and then I mentioned Embiid first or second, one or the other. So yeah, I mean, Philly's a team that just suffocates teams on the offensive end every night. In the playoffs, you think about how the playoffs work. The game is more about defense in the playoffs, so this team can be even scarier in the playoffs. This is my prediction to come out of the East. I think Philly's coming out of the East. I've been saying it all year. As great as I think Brooklyn is with their 3-star players, I just think when you look at Philly and what they can bring at the defensive end of the floor and what they have with Embiid and something that Brooklyn doesn't have, it's going to be a struggle, I think, for Brooklyn to beat Philly. I really do. Like I said, while Brooklyn has 3 Hall of Famers on their team, they haven't played together at all, really, this year. Only a few games. And to me, they seem too injury-prone. And even if they're healthy, I said Philly. I think Philly will beat them. I really do. Philly is the perfect matchup for Brooklyn, too, because Philly has the best big man in the Eastern Conference and arguably the league, right? Brooklyn has a really bad big man, right? Even when DeAndre Jordan was healthy, they're giving up 35, 40 points to Bam. They're giving up 35, 40 points to Brook Lopez, right? More of exaggerating a little bit with Brook Lopez, but you see the narrative of it. Brooklyn just can't guard big man, and they've shown it over and over, right? And now you go and you face Embiid, a guy who is having a historic season as a center, a guy who's having the best season of his career, averaging 30 points per game on 51% shooting 37% from 3. It's going to be the toughest matchup you have all year. And a lot of people are going to come back with, well, who can guard Durant, Kyrie, Harden? You got Danny Green can guard Kyrie. Simmons can guard Durant. And then Harden can be guarded by Matisse Thybulle, right? That's a matchup I can tell you right here, right now, that Brooklyn doesn't want to see, because you are putting 2 A-plus defenders in Thybulle and Simmons, right? They're going to go out and guard Kyrie, Harden, Durant, whoever they guard, right? But then not only that, you're giving at least an A-minus defender, probably an A-minus defender, Danny Green, who's a great defensive player, and he even shows better defensive energy in the playoffs, because a lot of times he struggles in the playoffs on the offensive end. But why do you think the Lakers played him so many minutes last year, even when he was struggling in the offensive end? Because he's that good of a defender. So With that being said, then you can put Danny Green on somebody, makes life even tougher. And then this is a team that the last couple of years struggled with depth too, right? Let me get into that for a minute. They don't struggle with depth anymore. You got Tyrese Maxey coming off the bench, who's a great rookie, playing great, shoots the ball really well, underrated playmaker, right? He has games where he can just score in outpours. He can score 25, 30. So Tyrese Maxey is a guy that is really going to help this team off the bench in the playoffs. And then you have Seth Curry, you have Dwight Howard, right? So you get the gist. This is a team that is very deep. And this is Philly's best team in a really long time, in my opinion. Definitely the best team Embiid's ever had in his whole career. I personally think this team is better than the team when they had Jimmy Butler and when they had Tobias and all those other guys and J.J. Redick. Because I think this team is deeper than that team. That team had like 2 good guys coming off the bench, maybe 1. This team has like 3 or 4 guys coming off the bench. Like I mentioned, you have Dwight Howard, you have Seth Curry, and Tyrese Maxey, right? And oh wow, it's crazy. I forgot about their biggest player off the bench. Then you have Shake Milton, right? Great scorer, underrated playmaker, defends well, an efficient player who can just light it up some nights. When Shake Milton is showing that when Simmons doesn't play, he can score 23, 24, right? And now he's coming off the bench. A guy who can give you a 14 off the bench, 14 and 5 in the playoffs and play respectable defense. Yeah, you pair that with Tyrese Maxey off the bench, Seth Curry, and Dwight Howard. And, then you can bring in guys like, Mike Scott and George Hill, right? This team has everything they need to win a championship. I think this team is going to win the championship. I said I think they're definitely coming out of the East, and I think they're probably going to win the championship too. That's my personal opinion. And everyone wants to talk about Brooklyn. Well, this is the worst matchup that Brooklyn can have. Brooklyn won't have a tough time with Milwaukee, in my opinion, even though Milwaukee's better, right? No disrespect. Brooklyn won't have a tough time with Miami, right? You may have a tough time you're going to have a tough time with Bam, though. I wouldn't sleep on Miami either the more I think about it. Because Miami has struggled this year. They've been playing better the last couple games, but they have struggled overall this year. But this is a team that when they get to the playoffs, they have that dog in them. They have that fight. So, and you got Jimmy Butler. Anytime you got Jimmy Butler, you got a running chance. So, it'll be interesting to see what Miami does. And if their shooters, Hero and Robinson, turn it on, they're going to be tough. But no, if I'm Brooklyn, I'm really looking at all the teams in the East right now, and I'm saying Philly's the one team that can beat us. And I think Philly can beat the Lakers too, right? So I'm taking Philly to win the whole thing because I look at Philly and I say they have shooting. They have the best defense in the league, in my opinion. They rebound well. They're very deep. They're well coached. See, when you looked at Philly the last couple of years, it was like, even with that team of Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris and J.J. Redick, right? They were really, really good, with Simmons and Embiid, obviously. But outside of their starting 5, their bench wasn't that great, right? Coaching with Bruce Brown was a big question mark. I was never a fan of him. So now you have a great head coach who's won a championship before. He's had a ton of experience. You have a better defensive team now than you did then. Guys like Simmons and Embiid and Harris have gotten even better than they were then. You have more depth off your bench now than you did then. So, no, this is a team, in my opinion, that, should be favorites. Maybe not favorites, but in my opinion, should come out of the East. I think they'll come out of the East. As long as they can stay healthy, right? They're getting everyone back right now, but as long as they can stay healthy, they're coming out of the East, right? I'm not 100% sold on Brooklyn yet either because, like I mentioned earlier, they're big 3. They've only played, 4 games together? And everybody says, they'll just pick it up in the playoffs. Well, even for those 3 guys who are vets and have had a lot of experience, right? Kyrie, has a ring. Kevin Durant has 2 rings. So those guys have a lot of experience when they get to the big games, right? And so does Harden. Harden hasn't won a championship, but he's been far in the playoffs. He has experience, but the experience does definitely matter. But when you don't play together that much in the regular season, it's hard to just build chemistry right off the bat in the playoffs. I think they'll get to the West. I think they'll get to the Eastern Conference Finals, because of how talented they are. But I think the lack of playing time together and the injuries, if I'm a Brooklyn fan, it would scare me. Right, and I think it should scare them too because there's too many factors against them right now, in my opinion. And when you get in the playoffs, you're gonna need everyone healthy. You're gonna need everyone there mentally, and you're gonna, nobody can miss games. You can't just miss games in the playoffs. And not playing together in the regular season at all for the 3 of them, barely only a couple games they played, is really gonna hurt, in my opinion. So, That's my take on Philly. So that will wrap up the Philadelphia 76ers part of the podcast. Make sure you tune in and go watch the 76ers play because they're a great team to watch. So I'm going to start with the second half of the podcast. I'm going to talk about the Sacramento Kings. This season has been really up and down for Sacramento. They go through winning streaks and then they go through losing streaks, right? And, that is why they're currently 12th in the West and they're 24-35. And they're 5 games behind the play-in game at number 10. Golden State's 10. They have the play-in game spot right now. So, De'Aaron Fox had the best year of his career. He's been great this season. A lot of people thought he should have been an all-star, when they put Conley in. But, yeah, Fox has been great this year. This is definitely not his fault for this team's struggles right now. They're playing at Fox is playing at a really high level. Team has struggled defensively, right? That's, I think, the big thing with this team. And then, before I get into more players, Luke Walton, right? Luke Walton hasn't really done much with Sacramento since he's been the coach there. They've blown a lot of late game leads, which usually when you blow late game leads, that's on the head coach, right? So, a lot of pressure on him. A lot of people want him to be fired in Sacramento. So, if this is my guess, this will probably be his last season in Sacramento if they're not able to reach the playoffs, which they probably won't be, looking at the rest of their schedule and looking at where they're at now. But, yeah, I mean, that's definitely another reason why I think Sacramento struggled this year. I think coaching's been a tough thing. The front office isn't great out there, and it hasn't been great out there for a really long time. So when you mix those two things together, it never ends up being a good situation. Buddy Hield this season has struggled, a little bit. And then at times he plays really well, right? But you look at Buddy Hield's last 2 seasons, and they've been a pretty big drop-off from what he did the previous season or two. And I think part of that may be because of the way Luke Walton plays him and benches him and, the type of rotations Luke Walton has for him. Buddy Hield is not taking a step forward in his ability to get to the rim. We know he can shoot the ball. We know he's lethal from beyond the arc, but he has not taken the next step forward in his game, which would be to put more of a handle, in his game and be able to shoot that mid-range jumper and be able to shoot or be able to put a handle on him so he can get to the rim as well, not just the mid-range jumper, right? Because we know he can shoot the 3, as I mentioned. So that's a big thing in Buddy Hield's development, in my opinion, is that he hasn't really taken all the necessary steps forward quite yet, too. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, part of it is coaching, the way Luke Walton coaches him and plays him in games and scenarios, right? But part of it's also the fact that Buddy Hield hasn't taken the steps forward, in my opinion, to become that player, right? 2 years ago, we looked at Buddy Hield and said, he's going to be an all-star soon. Now you look at Buddy Hield and you say, is he even going to get a contract after this contract's up in a couple of years? That's more than what he's making now, right? So, because he's making, very, very good money right now, currently making $24 million a year. So, it's interesting the way Sacramento's used Buddy Hield since Luke Walton got hired. And it's a guy who, like I said, needs to take the right steps to develop. But part of the reason he didn't develop, in my opinion, was because of the way he was coached, too. So maybe you bring a new coach into Sacramento this offseason and you see what steps Buddy Hield takes forward next year, because I think he could take big steps forward next year with a new head coach and a better scheme, right? That's the case of Buddy Hield. Let's talk about Tyrese Haliburton really quick. He's been great this season. In my opinion, he's second right now for Rookie of the Year behind Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards has really turned it up the last month and a half, because before that I was all in on Tyrese Haliburton getting Rookie of the Year, but the last month or so, Anthony Edwards has turned it up a lot, which is great to see. I'm a big fan of Anthony Edwards. But no, back to Tyrese Haliburton, he has been great this season. He's been extremely efficient. He's been a reasonable defender, right? He's been a good playmaker, and he's been a guy who, on nights when Fox and Hield struggle or Barnes struggles, he's been a guy who can kind of take a step up and at least give you a good performance. He might not get a win, but he gives you a good enough performance where you look at it and say, wow, that's a rookie. He's that efficient, right? He's got a lot of potential in this league. He's going to be a great player, Tyrese Haliburton. But yeah, just for a rookie to be as efficient as he's been, it's great. Definitely a steal for Sacramento in this year's draft. He went number 12, so that's a 100% a steal, right? He's much better than that. I think if there were a redraft, he would go number 3. So, yes, Tyrese Halliburton's been great this season. He's been consistent on both ends of the floor, right? So, yeah, no, Tyrese Halliburton has a lot of potential to be very good in this league and be like a Kyle Lowry type of player, in my opinion, when it's all said and done. Just an efficient scorer who plays good defense and knows how to get other guys involved without turning it over too much. So, Tyrese Halliburton is going to have a bright future in this league, and, can't wait to see what he's going to do moving forward. So, let me get into one more player here before I wrap up Sacramento's part of the segment. And I want to talk about Harrison Barnes. And I'm going to talk about him for a little while because his contract situation is very interesting. So he is making $24 million this season. So that's $24 million this season. He's making $22 million next season, followed by $20 million and then $18 million the final season. He will not be a free agent until after the 2022-2023 season. That is a contract that you are not going to be able to move because of how much he's getting paid. He's a solid player, but he's not worth $24 million a year. So like I said, that's a contract you're not going to be able to move. So Sacramento's going to be stuck with him until after the 2022-2023 season. And in my opinion, this is one of the things that's holding this team back. Sacramento might not be the most attractive destination when it comes to free agency, but they do have some young talent with Halliburton, Hield, and Fox, and Rashawn Holmes, and I think teams recognize that. Or not teams, sorry, players recognize that. Trust me, there's some players that wouldn't mind going to Sacramento. But you don't really have any cap space because you're paying Hield all this money. You gave Fox the extension. Hield or Fox 100% deserves the extension he got. Hield, that's questionable. Right, I think we have to wait one more year and see. But Barnes' contract is just messing a lot of things up for this team, in my opinion, because $24 million is a hefty price to pay for a guy who is a very inconsistent scorer, in my opinion. You look at his numbers, he scores a lot, but a lot of nights he shoots really poorly, and he's below average defender, too. He doesn't make plays for other guys. He doesn't rebound that well. So, it's interesting because I remember when Sacramento gave him that contract a couple years ago, and I thought to myself, they gave him the contract. They gave him the contract the season after, and they had him. They had him on the team the season before they gave him the contract, so they just extended him. They extended him during the offseason, but they gave him that extension. Or sorry, they re-signed him, not extended him. They re-signed him, you would say. They re-signed him after a season that they missed the 8 spot by like a game or a game and a half, and that was like when Hield was at his best and Fox was just getting continuously better every year, and Fox is still getting better every year. This is his best season, but Hield was playing at a really high level then, right? Those were two guys who, like, I remember they talked about it on TNT. They were like, these are two guys who are going to make the All-Star game next year, arguably, right? This was the season before they re-signed Barnes. And I just remember thinking to myself, when they re-signed Barnes for like $25 million a year, I just remember thinking to myself, and it was like a 5-year deal too, 5-6 year deal. I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is not the right move for Sacramento, right? Like, this is not the right move because they could have just let him walk, right? Other teams, or they could have paid him much less. Teams like Atlanta and I think Phoenix and also Boston said we'll pay him $17 million a year. But that was like the max that other teams would pay him. So why would you go out and pay him 25? Just pay him 18. Pay him 19. Right? You'll get him for $1 million or $2 more than what other teams are putting their max cap at. So when you paid him 25, it was just like you outbid yourself kind of. And I knew once they did that they were going to be in trouble, not just now, but in the future. Right? I knew this team would be in trouble. Because you can't pay a guy like that much money when you have a young team who's just learning how to develop and is starting to really gel well together. They were starting to gel well together. And I think Barnes hurts a lot of the rotations defensively, and I think a lot of times when you put the ball in Barnes' hands, he goes ISO, and that's not what this team needs, a small forward. This team needs like a 3-and-D guy at small forward who just, when he doesn't have a good look, he just moves it on, right? So that's just my personal opinion about that whole situation in Sacramento. But yeah, as for Sacramento, that will wrap it up for the Sacramento part of the podcast, which means that will wrap it up for episode number 6. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and make sure to tune in.